We're live.
Good morning, members of the media. Welcome to this press briefing by Dr. Kevin Greenidge, which serves this morning to update on the BERT program. Dr. Greenidge will begin with an opening statement, following which you can indicate your names and the organization represented, followed by your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, press, and welcome. This is really an update on the Barbados Economic and Recovery and Transformation Program. As part of our process and of keeping you informed as we make progress in that area. 2 areas I want to mention before we really move ahead and take questions. One is that, as you will have heard from the Prime Minister's address Sunday night, we concluded successfully the domestic component of the debt restructuring, which covers roughly close to 12 billion of our total stock of debt. And it was well executed in that we had approximately 99.6% of all creditors who voted yes. And from an international perspective, this is extremely high and an accomplishment. For example, Greece had 86%. And I believe St. Kitts was in the lower 90s. So 99.6% of all those who voted yes. We're still tallying, but around 95% of all holders of debt actually voted. So you can do the math. And again, a very high vote of confidence in the reform program in terms of what the overall objective of BERT is. And now I should also mention that part of the debt restructuring, we also folded into that arrears. As committed under the BERT program, the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, we intend to clear all the arrears within the 4-year period. And this debt restructuring actually takes care of about 1.1 billion, about 85% of outstanding arrears. 85% of outstanding arrears to the private sector, because the arrears elsewhere. And that is being paid over 4 years into the big institutions like Soil, etc. And again, remarkably, that is really a vote because you're paying what is owed in trade credits, suppliers credits over 4 years, which inject funds in the economy, which gets that to going, and there's no interest on that. So that's a commitment. The rest of arrears, which are mainly now will be VAT refunds and taxes owed to individuals, will be paid in a much shorter period. So that's one update. The other, and I'm going to keep it very short so I can answer your questions. You're not really here to listen to me talk all the time. Is on the modernization of the public sector. Now we mentioned that, and just to recap, and I keep seeing this as like a relay, a 4-legged relay. The first leg is really when we got our program approved and endorsed by the International Monetary Fund, which allowed us to have $582 million available to us over 4 years, and we already have about $100 million in the central bank. Plus, that endorsement opened the window, a calculated approach, effect where development partners, IDB, CDB, pledged close to $1 billion, and we re-engaged World Bank and other partners, CAF, in technical assistance and support, which is really an endorsement that persons believe the whole program hangs together and is achievable. So that's the relay number one. And relay number two, the second leg, was what I just described, successfully completing the domestic debt restructuring. And those instruments will be exchanged for new instruments by the end of October. Now, leg three, of course, is dealing with the issue that we must deal with before the end of the year, which is the fact that in the past, we have been committed a year or so ago to moving the ring fence around the offshore business sector, taxation versus onshore, and we need to deal with that in terms of convergence, and that assessment is now going on. And the next final part, not the final part, well, this party relay is to deal with the restructuring or modernization of the public sector, SOEs and central government, and we're doing them at parallel tracks. Now, you will heard yesterday, you saw in the media, and the Prime Minister also discussed it Sunday night, where in central government, the focus is on modernization, We have been in constant discussion at the level of the social partnership, and the number that we're looking at is just low 800 in terms of public workers, split between, I think, about 250 in stenotypists, clerk typists, NTW 290 something, and the remainder from different areas. Now the focus, as the Prime Minister explained, is not about numbers, because if it's a numbers game, it's not consistent with the BERT program. It is about modernization and improving efficiency in the way we do things, looking at access areas, and see if can we do better what we'll be doing. Under that, underlying that is the fact that we have to move the public sector from this bloated, inefficient entity into a more streamlined, efficient entity for the 21st century. That being said, I think it's perhaps at this time I should start to engage with a conversation with you guys in terms of any questions you may want me to answer.
Okay, I'm Shane Jones, CBC. Since you just ended on the point of the retrenchment, since the end date is 2022, it's a 4-year program with the IMF, right? This phase of retrenchment, is it a first phase, or can we expect this to be the only phase throughout this 4-year program?
Look at it as you restructure any business. Right, what we did is to go through central government, let's do with central government, and look at different posts which if you had to design a public sector there, you wouldn't have stenotypists. You wouldn't have it. And then look at these posts. Also look at the way in which things are done. In some instances, for example, there may be some institutions where mail comes in, and before it reaches the recipient, it passed through at least 4 or 5 persons, one opening, one write it down. So you look at the overall approach and you try to trim that. So it's not about numbers. Now, under the BERT program, or program itself that we set a target of savings in terms, from efficiency, in terms of the public sector. So that target, if we do what we need to do now, and this is a critical part that has to be done now. It's part of the overall whole puzzle that fits together. Remember, a large part was played by the international community who endorsed and allowed us to get financing to support our program. Another large part is played by the creditors who contribute for 500 million savings in interest payments for the next 3 years. That frees up fiscal space that you can do what you want to do. Plus another 800 every year in principle for the next 3 years. That's a significant contribution. Put that in perspective, the government wage bill, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but 780 million roughly. So that's almost 3/4 of that. Now, if you had to get that from labor, you're talking about more than 3/4 of the public sector. Your specific question will be reoccurring. If you are able, because some things, some institutions, you say SOEs, Transport Board, Water Authority, etc., they are big. It's a lot of work going, so you have to tackle that over a longer period. But some central government itself, if we are able to, for each one, we went through each institution and look at access, look at what is need to be done, how will you modernize it given technology today, then that in itself is the end. Because it's not about numbers. You're not going to say, oh, okay, you need another 1,000, need another 100, so that means cut. No. Is this institution set up to do what it's supposed to do and deliver the services it's supposed to deliver as efficient as it can be? If the answer is yes, then it stops. But if the answer is not yes, because remember, we also going to be digitizing the entire public sector. And some of the same persons who go off will come back to fill that role. So in that context, okay, again, I want you to focus on the overall objective. It is to modernize the public sector, streamline, because it has grown so big and so bloated and inefficient that we had, because saying too many pots spoil the broth, too many cooks, in one space, doing too much. So from that perspective.
And to follow up, since you mentioned the government's wage bill, what is the estimated reduction? What will be reduced to after this phase of retrenchment, and what are the long-term and short-term savings government is going to make because of that?
All right. On central government, remember this wage bill, what been happening over the past is that the wage bill has gradually been creeping down in central government. Mm-hmm. So it's not a problem as central government wages itself. But if you look at the SOEs, that's been growing, we're getting below this. So if you focus on central government, remember, The object wasn't to reduce that wage bill. The object is to increase efficiency in delivery, what we're doing. This is one-on-one stress. Now, overall, our target on under our BERT program is really to move from a primary deficit this year, but we want to get 3.3% primary deficit. Primary deficit means after you strip out, forget about interest payments, because you can't do anything about that. Well, we did in terms of debt restructuring, but technically, that is commitments you made a year ago. So yes, your revenues minus your non-interest expenditure is the primary deficit. When we consider what it takes to run government, given that you have to be current on arrears, we don't plan to run any arrears, you can't under the BERT program. We've committed to monitoring no arrears will be accumulated. In 2017-18, the last fiscal year, the deficit was about 2.3, but that did not take into consideration you ran arrears. So add those back in. The deficit probably was about close to 3.3 or so. So we intend to run a primary deficit of 3.3 for the remainder of this fiscal year, which is really almost a percentage point improvement from 2.3, 3.3. And then we intend to raise that primary deficit to 6%. By all accounts, that's a huge fiscal effort. So look at a mixture of savings. From the central government wage bill, you can get efficiency by improving processes, etc. And thereby, essentially not focus on numbers, the amount which is just about 800 million is the follow, and which a program is put in place to take care of them. Then on the SOEs, we're aiming again through efficiency, and the Prime Minister mentioned a lot of things we're doing in that area. We need to get sufficient to help us hit that 6% primary balance from 3.3, right? Now, because we can go and just cut and do all things, but we will not be dealing with the underlying problem. Although we have a target in there, and you can look at it, it's about 1 percentage point gain from the SOEs. If we don't get that, because if we delay, again, it's important, we move fast. If we delay, then it has to come from somewhere else. Because remember, the 3.3, the target 6% of GDP, that increase, which is from 2.3 to 6, 2.7, comes from everything you do, right? So you got, for example, the capital expenditure program, which was really almost non-existent, well, really low compared to what is needed over the last couple of years, at 1.54% of GDP. To do the work needed and to get the economy growing, you need to step up capital. Capital is what grows the economy, right? Investing in roads and in buildings and putting things in place like private sector come on board. That grows the economy. That is stepped up to about 2.5% of GDP. A percentage is 100 million, so that's 250 million roughly, right? But of course, if we don't move fast on the SOEs and the modernization, then we'll have to come and say, well, you might have to slow down the capital because they have to hit that target. Because that target is consistent with putting our debt to GDP ratio in that downward trajectory. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not like absolute. So this is why time is important. I quite agree. Leg one, we dealt with the international acceptance and endorsement and provision of funds. Leg two, debt restructuring. And the external components being dealt with as I speak now, the external creditors. Leg three, we have to deal with the revenue issues that we have in terms of offshore and onshore. And leg four, we are dealing with the SOEs. And all of those fit together in a puzzle. When I say a puzzle, remember we have a huge deficit in terms of our fiscal position, which then caused infrastructure deficits, no growth and everything like that.
Since you just spoke about you're speaking about targets, I know the first tranche was used to shore up the reserves primarily. Is there a target date for the second tranche, or what are the conditionalities before we get that second tranche from the IMF?
So, first of all, I'm going to answer your question, but let's get terminologies right. Again, don't want confused. When you hear conditionalities, I think this is something IMF said. This is not the case. And I'm saying so, I'm in public, I work for, I'm on staff, so I'm not going to tell you something is not so, right? Only the BERT program, which Barbados developed, which we as Barbadians put together and is being endorsed by the international community, we set targets. Those targets, like the primary balance I just told you, getting 6% for the next 4 or 5 years. Another target will be no arrears. Critical, you're not going to accumulate arrears. Our next target will be savings from restructuring SOEs, right? These targets and building reserves, what you call conditionalities, will be assessed semi-annually. We'll be reporting to the IMF and international community and to the social partnership every month. But in terms of going to the executive board of the IMF in order to get a disbursement, that will be semi-annually. The first one was in October. The next time it will be due will be meeting our targets for the end of the year. So twice a year you will get a disbursement for the fund. And roughly again in the tunes, maybe 100 million until the 582 is exhausted. But that again, we plan to put that into the reserves position to boost reserve, which boosts international confidence, because when investors look on, that's what they see. You know, your reserve position at your individual bank account, for example. The rest of fiscal savings is what we're using to pay down arrears. And the funds that come in from the IDB and CB will be based on the policies that we are putting in place, will also help to boost the economic pay down arrears and things like that.
Good morning, Emmanuel Joseph, Barbados Today. You mentioned a figure of 800. I want to get some clarity. Last night, the National Union of Public Workers gave us a figure of 955. Could we get some clarity on that in terms of central government?
No, so, this is a continuing evolving process. Again, it's not about the numbers. So the number as we stand now is around 815, 820. You can't do the exact number because we're constantly looking back and looking how it's done. Is that we went through the entire central government. This is central government only. And we look at each department, what they do, look at the workflow, the work processes, and ask the question, can it be done better? Are there efficiencies to gain? Can it be taken? Can we improve how we do things? And of course, look at posts, which we will not have in the 21st century with digital technology, where all of us have iPhone, we type, we do our things, stenotypists, card typists. We also look at NTW. Remember, part of the BERT program is to empower workers. So there are things in the NTW where we ask ourselves, could this be better, could this service be better done outside the MTW, owned by workers, in franchise, and then sell back to NTW? That pushed up about 293 workers from NTW, which we believe will have the skills to be part of the empowerment path, right? And so when we do that, then we look back at these other considerations for us in last too. This is all discussed at a social partnership. So it's possible that the number they have has since even been made smaller because we're revisiting all of them. But as it stands, there's 293 from NTW, 219 from stenotypists, card typists, and some other parts of the public sector. So roughly, this only central government, roughly 814 at the moment. Right. But again, remember, Emmanuel, it's not, as a Bajan, I think we need to get, I want to be honest with you, I am always tell you the truth. It's not about the numbers game. If it's a numbers game, we could cut a number and then you're okay. But the problem, you haven't fixed the problem, why you had them in the first place. You understand? I mean, even take post office. The post office structure, the post office we had when it was first established. Have you when last you receive a personal mail from anyone? So is that the right structure we need, given the technology that we currently have? E-billing is possible, pay your bills online through your taxes, etc. So you have to look, you deliver this service, may have to relook.
Right. The General Secretary of the NUPW also is crying gender bias in terms of those who are going home. It would appear, I don't know if it's coincidental or deliberate in terms of the females. They say the females are the majority who are going home.
Let me ask you what you think. Watch it. Stenotypists, card typists tend to be a post which you will not have in modern day. But by default, they tend to be a post most held by women. But that's how much I told you just now, 219? What was the number I told for NTW? 293. That's more, right? And those tend to be mostly males doing different concrete and things. So think about it. And the process in which I described to you is not when, honestly, when we come up with, we look at posts, we don't look at people. So I don't know if you're looking at the Ministry of whatever, and we're looking and say, well, look, when a letter comes in, instead of having 3, 4, 5 persons, one open the letter, one write the letter in the book, one carry the book down the corridor, another take it. Let's just have a document management system where it's input, they scan and send to a person. We don't know who those 3 or 4 people will be or are. It's just posts. So one, if you look at the overall central amount, the 800, I'm sure that most are male. mills because MTW is the largest component. Then you got like post office and 1 2 in there. If you look at the only category of stenographers, typists, it will happen to be females. But the answer you could clearly see will be that's the nature of the position. But there's clearly be any specific policy to look for gender. I mean,
As we speak now, what are the reserves looking like?
well, if I could pull up my phone, I could tell you. But last time I think it was close to because you have the EMF funds right there, the short reserves. We start paying debt, so that slowed down the bleeding. Then you have the Ross money came in, and that would have short the reserves. So I think we're above 600 now. But before any meeting, you can get the actual true number. You see, using my technology, I can tell you the true number.
Advocate newspaper.
But it is rising. The upward trend is there. And that's again the confidence. As that starts to rise, people start to feel more relaxed that they can have enough reserve to protect the exchange rate and to do normal transactions, don't have to worry where can I get the US dollars, right? So.
Yeah, in your opening, you spoke about the success of the debt restructuring program, especially from the local aspect. But how can you talk about the successful debt restructuring in that light, given that the fact that a number of people are still hurting from the decisions that you have already made?
Mm-hmm. So I think, success in terms of what I talked just now, I spoke about the participation rate, the endorsement program, 99.6%. Now, I think you're referring to pensioners and individuals, right? Okay, so let's talk about that objectively. Pensioners and individuals who would have had government debt now have a new instrument. The fact is that new instrument now, you get back your entire principal. If you invest 10,000, you got back 10,000. Plus, you got back interest on that. But your interest is probably slightly less than our calculation, say maybe at most 25% less. So at any day, you're getting back, you protect your principal, and you're still getting back income on that. The drawback now, which we have to deal, and we are dealing with, is that you have infinite maturity. So in some places, in some instances, persons were expecting next year or next month or soon to have their full amount at their disposal, and given the age, they really want it now. But then you have to stretch that. Because the debt restructuring was ongoing, the man said, you couldn't, while we were developing a plan, you couldn't enact a plan to deal with that. But there's a plan in place, and government is currently working on a plan to deal with those persons. And many options exist. For one, there's nothing stopping us now that we have concluded that restructuring to say, for example, and this will come because the debt restructuring creates some fiscal space, and also any surplus you get, let's buy back, for example, X amount of debt. Say, we have to work on a number, let's say $75,000. So that will cover almost all individuals who look at the profile tend to have amounts around that, you see? So you need to buy, one is find you can buy back, and you don't want to exclude anyone, so no one can say, well, I'm favoring one group or next. You can buy back some of that debt. Two, because we have paying back NAS, the rates are over, it has been accumulated over the last couple of years. You will find that NAS and other institutions, but NAS in particular, will be very liquid. And this creates a kind of a demand-supply opportunity where individuals now, because they structure those things, can actually maybe interested in selling there, or NAS interested in buying those instruments because they're interested in more long-term, and you get, so if you have, say you have $100,000, you sell it to NAS, you probably get your $100,000 now, and maybe it's just a little less than the interest that you want, but you get it back right now. So this is the plan that the government will be announcing, the details to be worked out. If the bottom line is that the problem there is maturity. Yeah? You don't want to hold instruments so long where you need your money now. In many instances in that restructuring, because of medical issues or other urgencies, you make a case where individuals get back, can be taken care of. Because at the end of the day, you don't want the vulnerable and those in society who really endorse you by saying, yes, I will agree to that restructuring, at the end of the day to be suffering.
Which are the options you or your team on BERT support in dealing with the pensioners? And the other thing, before you answer that, I would also want to hear from you whether, okay, people out there are saying that government instruments, the ones that went before and the new ones that have been brought about, there are endangered species, and people are not going to be putting their money in any new government instruments, given what they have gone through over the past couple of weeks.
So it's two questions. Yeah. Which one you want me to do first? Second one? All right, in terms, listen, countries before Barbados, countries after Barbados restructure their debt. At some point in time, if you don't pursue proper policies, the fundamentals will erode your ability to pay. In all of those cases, people eventually, confidence return, and people eventually invest in those, in government again. Because when you are going to make an investment decision, now emotions are high, but when you go make an investment decision, you look at fundamentals. You look at the ability of the person you're investing in to repay, right? And over time, this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program will restore and correct all the fundamentals that we existed before. We can repay in the past because the debt was too high. Your debt was too high because you're running fiscal balances averaging 7.5%. So my thing to you is that confidence is being restored, just as the international community is investing. Locals will find it necessary because the excess income and wealth they have to start to invest again. And therefore, I unlike what you're thinking, I have no concern that people will be coming after government paper, because even the investment community, you know, we have like 22 downgrades, so we are the bottom now, already are looking and evaluating what we are doing, and the sentiment is, and I can tell you, I believe before the end of the year you will see us go a notch. That investment grade is going to start to go back up, and when your institutional investors looking to invest, they look at the grade. Barbados is going to be right there to invest in Barbados, so I don't have that as a major concern. And the second question?
Which of the options you prefer?
Oh, well, the team, to be honest with you, that all of that is being explored, because as you can appreciate, we just concluded, and we have to focus on that. For me, I think you should give all options. But first of all, you need to develop, the reason why a lot of persons invest in government securities, etc., because there's not much, we call economics market debt. There's not a lot of things you can invest in. We need to start to develop that secondary or that market that persons can invest. And I believe NIS having a very liquid position should provide opportunity, including, and also with central bank perhaps getting involved in developing second market options for persons to invest. You might say, well, let me go that route. Another, the option to buy back party debt is also an option. So to me, you look at a menu of options, because you may not, whatever you do, this whole sacrifice that we made as Barbadians for the BERT was really to get our debt and our fundamentals fit and get our debt on a downward trajectory. Every decision we make going forward must ensure that debt remains like that. 60% by 2023 on a path. So that means like by 2026, you're at 100 or below, close to 80, right? So every decision now must be met in a prudent manner, that it does not, you have to feel what the effect. So if you have fiscal surplus and you can buy back that helps put the debt on and down. That is a sound financial and fiscal decision. You understand? By buying back some of your debt. And people do that all the time. So to me, the answer to you, all options will be on the table. But your main point in the concern you're saying is dealing with pensioners and those in a situation where they may need liquidity now, they may have medical bills, etc. That is something that will 100% be dealt with. Other syndicates dealt with it. It is not unusual. Other countries will deal with these, but you deal with them after the debt restructuring. You do a plan and you deal with it.
Good morning, Sean Cumberbatch from The Nation. As you indicated, there are some targets to be met by December. In the interest of clarity, can you indicate to us what targets we have either reached already or are close to, and what targets are left to be reached between now and December?
Okay, so the things we are doing is putting us on a path to meet those targets. The debt restructuring is, so for the debt restructuring, that will free up the fiscal space necessary for us to do what we need to do. So the things we're doing, the debt restructuring, the endorsement of our program is all in us to path to meet certain targets by end December, end year. So for example, one target is to pay down arrears. So you can really see we are well on the way because we started paid on a raise. Another target will be the primary balance of 3.3% by end the fiscal year. Right? Now that comes from a combination of effort. On the revenue side, the spreading of the fiscal burden across, the tax burden across not only domestic, but our international community, and raising 1 or 2 rates, like the top of the personal income tax rate and the corporation helps with that. But what we're doing on the expenditure side in particular, the reforms we are starting on the SOEs and on the central government modernization. This is why I say it's critical, because the more we delay, it actually endangers the work that we have sacrificed so far, that every Barbadian has committed to. It's almost like you have to do it by default, because the same pensioners, the same individuals who voted, yes, that sacrifice will be endangered if we don't do what we need to do to modernize and get the savings we need. In terms of the specific targets, we have a target on the primary balance. We are going to hit 3.3% by any fiscal year and then 6% going forward. That will give us enough surplus to pay down arrears, etc. We will not accumulate any arrears, so I mean we have to monitor what the SOEs are doing. They have to report on a continuous basis, and we have to zero arrears, and we have to be current on payments. So we have to be current on VAT refunds, we have to be current on tax payments, etc. Right? So those are some of the targets that we have. And if you look at the IMF staff report, which was based on what we have endorsed in the BERT program, and you will see, I think it is on page 52, you will see all the targets out there that they have agreed that they will monitor on our behalf on page 52. So it's all public information.
Okay. I want to take you back to a question asked by my colleague from CBC earlier. You keep stressing it is not a numbers game as far as the public sector job losses are concerned. But you're dealing with people's livelihoods, and obviously people will be concerned and nervous across the various departments and SOEs. So in the interest of clarity, and it's an issue that the public is wondering whether or not the 1,500 job losses that are likely to take place within the next few weeks, whether that is it, or whether there are likely to be additional job losses when you tackled the SOEs in terms of reorganizing them, mergers, etc.
No, I think the same question you asked before.
I wasn't clear.
You should work for
I didn't ask it before. I'm asking questions because these are questions that public
I understand.
are asking.
No, but I'm just teasing you. So the 1,500 mentioned, of course, the central government we said about 800. The remainder will come from the SOEs for the restructuring for the remainder of this fiscal year. But I also mentioned that we got to do some heavy lifting, which can be done this year. Remember when we had I think you probably saw, we had an online survey that identified out of the 93 companies, SOEs, ones that they thought was essential, highly desirable, optional, but delivered elsewhere. And that gives us a sense of those institutions that we can tackle in this fiscal year, like the CARES, Kwame, those that we think you can get efficiency right away. And then there's some that we all know, you don't have to do any survey, that if you have to restructure, we'll do some heavy lifting. Transport Board, right? Water Authority, BAD-MC, and BAD, not all the acronyms probably, but you can't do them anymore. So those will spill over to the next fiscal year. But I just try to modernize them and bring them up to speed. So that 1,500, of course, the 8 we already start to cover, but the remainder now will come from, we start to deal with those that we can, and they're online, you can find it, the presentations we made identify those companies that you can deal with, and the Prime Minister talk about them on Sunday night. So I'm fooling you that when you start to deal with Transport Board and Water Authority over the next fiscal year too, it's going to be heavy lifting, huh? You have to address all. In many sense, stopping. There may be some other, but keep in mind that we not think about negative, think about positive. We are digitalizing the public sector. We have that's at least roughly a 3-year program where many of these persons can find work. You have then Sanders coming on board, you have Ross University. We expect the private sector also grow at such a rate that people coming up with anti-developed places can find employment. Then there's the enfranchising component of modernizing those in transition component that can occur from the same NTW, from the same transport board. So yes, if one person is displaced, we all feel the pain. But let me put it in perspective. If from an international perspective and comparing what other countries have, our situation was quite dire. The whole Barbados was in a very bad position. So if you tell anyone that you're able to fix this problem with only 1,500 fallout, they will say, but tell me what you guys doing down there. This is a model that we should export to other countries in terms of restructuring. Right? So yes, one is too much. And we need to put a system in place, and systems have been put in place to take care of persons, to find employment, to retrain, to be franchised and perhaps provide services back through the procurement project legislation the Prime Minister spoke about. But in terms of context, this is minimum.
Okay, last question. Can you give us a sense of the timeline for the dealing with the foreign debt in terms of the debt exchange or debt restructuring for the foreign creditors?
So we have right now, the team actually met in London, I believe yesterday, with a meeting with the external creditors. I can't give you a timeline because like with all negotiations, you go as fast as you can go. But we expect this not to be drawn out. Personally, I will say before the end of the fiscal year. But remember, the domestic component is the largest component of our debt. So that's quite an achievement. The external now has to come into line because there was also some external, the debt that was contracted externally had a lot of bullet payments and coming at specific times that will really hurt you, right? Like in 2022, I think there was 1 or 2 bullet payments. We all know the information. So if you didn't deal with them, you run the risk that in 2 or so years you are back to the same position because you cut a bullet payment. A bullet don't hurt you, they hit you, no? So you have a bullet payment, you don't pay the principal, you pay interest, but when the principal come, it's like a bullet. You have many countries say, oh Lord, you gotta go. And the fact that we can't go back to the market to borrow, at least for the next 4 years, because our credit rating have come to non-existent, means that we have to service any debt going forward from surpluses we made on the fiscal. That's the end of the story. And we can grow the economy in such a way that we get fiscal surpluses, right? So if you didn't restructure the external, those coming bullet payments run the risk that you're back where we are. So you might well do the whole hog one time and then. Agree? I shouldn't be saying it like that, no. More professional. But did I answer your question? So, I expect because we are providing with all the necessary information as the domestic creditors had, we're negotiating in good faith, I believe that should be a few months concluded.
Dr. Greenidge, Prime Minister Motley insists that the restructuring and the retrenchment must be done in a caring way, and she says government will hold the hands of workers, and she says that people would go home with a check with money in their hands. So let me ask a question. How much will severance cost, and will the funding be by central government, or will some of this money be coming from the IMF money?
That for the IMF money goes to the central bank. It doesn't go to do anything else. It cannot be used for anything else. It's ready to show a reserve and bring confidence. I can't tell you off the top how much it is. The Ministry of Civil Service is working on that. But the answer, I think the real thing to focus on your question is really that there's a commitment that every person who is displaced will walk with a check. I can tell you we had a meeting yesterday where some were suggesting that it may be tough to meet that criteria, and the Prime Minister expressed that that's a line we can't cross. It's a hard line. So whatever needs to be done, whatever new resources needs to be found, we have to find them in order to ensure that persons walk away. Now, we would, in terms of financing that, it will have to come from the fiscal. But remember, we are going to be saving on debt. So we will have to finance it over a period. We will save because we did on the debt restructuring, not paying that huge interest payments that we have to pay. We expect to save, I say, 500 million combined for both domestic and external. We probably have 4.5 something million right now, 400 something million saved, and on the external. So we're going to free up fiscal space. That was a problem we had before, no fiscal space, right? But to answer your question, I don't know the number of and how much it will cost. But whatever it costs, I think that's not so much a focus. The focus is that persons must have what is due for them. And I think the Prime Minister, she expressed a severance type like package. Plus, we are interested in doing it in such a way that you give person options also. There's no joy in 800, this, as you say, it won too much. But there's an advantage of having such a small number. It means literally, you can know every single person. You can track the interests of every single person. You can ask them what you want to do. Do you want to be part of the registration program? Do you want to go into the private sector? Do you want to own a piece of agricultural land? Do you want to have a greenhouse? Do you want to provide a service back to government? How can I help you? You can track literally every single one of those 800 persons, plus persons, and ensure that you take care of them throughout the entire process. If it was to talk about 5,000, 4,000, now you can see, right? But if 800 plus give us an ability to really show care, that you know every single person and you can follow them through the whole process and walk them through it. The Prime Minister set up in her office, a mitigation office. We have the technology. I mean, you can have on your just a small database. And so this person will also be getting, we discuss this with union, with the social partnership, a form of options before they go, what you want to do. Here are the options that are available. The digitalization project we hope to start by the beginning of next year. Most of those persons will be back in there. And that's financial IDB, right? So yes, I think I want to try to look at this in a positive light. This number is small. One is too much, but it is a manageable something that we can really take care of everyone. And not only through the digitalization, but this person can also retrain in areas that will allow them to provide services long after that project is over, like medical transcription and medical coding and legal transcriptions, right? Different projects that they can be involved in retraining.
Well, let's go forward to the next fiscal year in respect of the heavy lifting entities. Do you have an idea what you're looking at in terms of cuts, or have you started to assess what you need to do in terms of a target for these other entities?
Well, the team has started to look, not right, when I say for next year, not we waiting next year, the work starts now. You have to go into those institutions and understand the process from top to bottom in the delivery service. Now it's difficult to say, well, transport board, we cut X amount. You can't do that. You have to go and see, okay, what are the issues? How is the process being delivered? How can we improve it? In a modern day, if I had to set up this institution, how would I set it up? That process has started and will be done in such a way to ensure that when we finish, the service delivered by like Water Authority and the Transport Board is second to none in the world. Right now, we know the issues we have with buses not working and things breaking down. We know all the issues. What we want to know is focus on solutions. So internally, there may be some gains that you start to do piece by piece, but we expect to see the results of this into the next fiscal year.
Dr. Greenidge, we have a few questions from our Facebook Live audience. This one is from Sonia. What is the savings to government from this exercise of sending those persons home?
From central government? Now, again, in the overall scheme of things, the modernization of the central government on paper should save us roughly 30 million or so. That's a move in the next fiscal year. But again, the savings doesn't come from that, The savings is really the efficient delivery of services, so that it doesn't take you as long to get things done when you go to the government institutions and the departments. Things are more enabling, which also helps the private sector to get on board and get things up and going. So the savings from a monetary perspective may be minor. That's a small amount, contributing to overall fiscal savings that give us a primary balance of 6% by the next fiscal year. But again, the efficiency gains, and we all know what it is to go to some government offices. I mean, we do our best, but yes, indeed, you need to employ the latest technologies, document management systems, etc., digitization to get the job done more efficiently.
There's another one from Sonia, and she's asking, would it not be better to train those workers you want for the modernizing of central government instead of just sending them home, than to rehire some of those persons?
We are training them. Remember we did the digitization project, but first of all, even if persons don't want to become in the digitization project, there's a training fund about $30 million at the moment where persons can opt to what areas they want to be training. So we are training them. But let's take a simple example. You have 4 or 5 people moving a letter from the time it comes into insurance, it reach the person. So what you're suggesting that you keep the extra 3 persons or so and train them at the same time? It's not the best use of their resources. You can employ them other ways or put a system in place where they can retrain. So the training is happening and will happen, and among other options. But the focus again is the ensuring that the delivery of services within that institution is as efficient as can be.
Another one before I pass over to Joel. Hal on Facebook is stating the Barbados dollar has appreciated by about 10% since April. Why is this, and is it good for the economy?
Truthfully, I don't know how to talk about. The last I checked, dollar was still 2 to 1. It fits the US dollar, so it's hard talking about US rising. Remember, I am not that refined. That's how I call me, man. No, but here's the point I want to mention though on that. Our 2 to 1 was preserved. Because truth be told, if you had to do in other countries, you have to do a fiscal adjustment of the magnitude we're doing, or you have to fix a problem of the magnitude, the exchange rate is usually one of the tools you use to pull that lever. And we have been blessed in such a way that we'll be able to design a program that allows us to preserve our exchange rate. So we took that literally came off the table. That is why we need to do the other things that need to be done to keep it. Indeed, you probably heard the Prime Minister, and we all know that you would have loved to get more funds from the IMF. And perhaps I should mention that now. We got 220% a quota. Now, perspective is important. What's 100% a quota? We didn't get 100%, we got twice and a bit. Okay? In schemes of things, 100% income is normal. So we got way above normal. We're a small country. 200% and 20% would still equate to 580 something or 300 million US. For a country that I work on like Zambia, 200% is way over 2 billion. We are a small country, but in terms of quota, we got exceptional access. And you can only get exceptional access if your program demonstrates exceptional commitment and effort. No, so that's the first point. It's always perspective. We would have loved more, truth be told. Everybody wants more. But more importantly, why? Because we need to rebuild our buffers in such a way, because if something unfortunate happens to Dominica and others, a storm hit, it won't take a while before the international community comes. You need to use some of that to help, buy your staff, your essentials and things. So you need to rebuild your buffers to allow for some of that. And in addition, we want to open up the capital account a bit faster so that these restrictions that you get on the flow of finance ease. And if you could do that, you open, they're going to just pull back like a tsunami and then come forward. So you need a buffer for that. So all that means is that because we didn't get as much as we would have loved, we will have to probably slow down on the open up a little more graduated pace. But that being said, the beauty of it is the category approach. We got much more because of the endorsement that came in. So I don't know what screen you're looking at, but maybe Hal could call me and tell me how you get that 10% appreciation.
But the question though is that, did Barbados ask for more from the IMF? You said the country would have loved to have been given more, but that was not the case. That really is not that's a question, but my main question though is relates to the areas, the sectors that are going to grow this economy. I'm sure you were at the symposium last Monday night at the University of the West Indies where your colleague, Shane Lowe, he pointed that
you missed me, I presented.
Pardon?
I mean, if I was there, presented. You missed me? I was there, actually was one of the presenters.
Yeah, but I said I'm sure you would have heard him saying that tourism has not been, the real drive of the economy. as was the case in previous years, that it has slowed down and its contribution to GDP has fallen. And in light of the fact also that there's a 250 to 260 million hole in income coming from the international business sector as a result of what Canada had done in amending its income tax laws, and that is something that we have to fix. So against that background of tourism not doing as well as we would like and the problems with the international business sector, what are the real areas that are going to grow this economy so as to give the country or to give the government the surpluses that you've been speaking about?
All right, so you have about 3 or 4 questions in one. The first part was about where we got what we asked for, because we put together a program that we know that we believe we can have faith in and that persons will endorse. So we asked for what we knew we can get, but that don't mean we didn't want more. Now, and yes, I was there presenting with Shane. I think, so tourism remains the key driver of this economy. What Shane pointed out is that, according to his statistics, even though there were more bodies here, that the spending was down. That what he really pointed out. So you say the bodies were like 11% increase in tourist arrivals, but the actual contribution was smaller. Now, there's the issue with the data in terms of getting proper data in terms of how much tourists spend. But all the indications indicate that tourism still made a contribution and will continue to make a contribution going forward. Tourism is the driver. In fact, just think about it, Ross University. Now, when I was working on St. Kitts, the students, we used to consider them 9 months tourists because they're here at least 9 months. They've got to eat, they've got to live, they sell, they interact with the economy, and they have to pay rent, right? That equates to maybe about 60,000 more tourists a year. So that's been a significant driver of tourism. Then you have the others, like if you saw like the Korean Beach signing a contract with Hilton to expanding the area of ownership, villa ownership, etc., timeshare. All this will argue well for the economy. So tourism will continue to drive this economy. But not only that, a lot of other projects coming in. You saw Sanders is supposed to build a place, employing about 3,000 workers. Sanders does its own marketing. There's a tourism group that follow that.
Isn't that tourism related?
Yes, they're all tourism.
Okay.
So my thing is that, yes, tourism will continue to be a driver. Tourism will pull this economy. Okay. But what we have to do, there's 2 sides of tourism nowadays, the demand and supply side. Remember, if we don't get our infrastructure correct, upgrade our product, and provide an environment that tourists want to revisit, then the competition is stiff. So if you have an advisory that was being actually against us about sewage in the streets and things, people are not going to come. That is why we need to invest and get the investment coming in where we build out and get the growth going and get the roads fixed and everything so that we encourage tourists. But I have no doubt that tourists will continue to remain one of our drivers. On the international side, yes, we have a target was committed in past years to remove the ring fence between the offshore business sector and the domestic. And that means that we have to look at issues of convergence. How do we bring the two together? And what would be the appropriate rate? Now, of course, you have more options of growing the international business sector than you have to grow in the domestic business sector. Either way, a fall in tax, if you're going to converge, it's more likely that the domestic tax will have to come down. What that does, that's good for business. That puts more opportunities, for more money for them to be able to invest and reinvest. That's good for business. On the other hand, the offshore business sector, there are other things. If you have a lower rate there, then all you have to do is focus on the services, provision of services that they will be want to come, and market it as much as you can as a destination that you want to set up business in. Efficiency in payment and taxes, efficiency in transportation, communication, efficiency in infrastructure, etc. Yes, it's a challenge, and fooling you is a challenge, but it's something that we have to confront, have to do. And that's on the revenue side. What that means is that the revenue going forward, maybe in some areas could be uncertain. That's what you're getting at, which is where you have to be very focused and determined on the expenditure side and what we're doing.
So technically then, it's just those 2 sectors, tourism and international business?
No, I think, no. You will see that tourism, when you see tourism sector growing, what you see, transportation growing. services by taxi all around, all the auxiliary services that's the globe. Not only that, when the economy is boosting, you get remove impediments of growth. You're doing growth enhancing impediments where you improve things, process at town country planning, improve how long it takes to clear things at customs. If you look at the doing business indicators that's published by the OECD website and also a World Bank, there are areas which focus on what we can do to remove impediments to growth. Those things will also help other sectors to pick up and grow, help people to set up businesses and take advantage of a booming economy.
Dr. Greenidge, another question from our Facebook audience. This one is coming from Kamisha. And Kamisha is asking, won't sending home persons put added pressure on the national insurance scheme in terms of unemployment benefits?
Watch it. All that will be factored into numbers. Truth be told, the idea is for these persons to be re-employed, either in the digitization project, either in other parts of the economy, either in the private sector. You have the Ross University, you have Sanders, you have different projects coming on board. So the net, when I told you the fiscal number, that was a net, that was the net plus. Yeah. Again, I think, yeah.
Could you say that Ambassador is going to?
Like I said earlier in a different question, the whole process of modernizing and restructuring transport board is a process ongoing. And we haven't reached a stage where we can even start to think about increasing user fees. Obviously, you have to increase user fees in some areas. That is one area that has not been increased in decades. I mean, it was at $2 for quite a while. So obviously, it has to go up. By how much? I can't tell you, because no number exists at the moment at which we're going to. That's a process ongoing that has to be discussed across the board. So I don't know. That's the honest truth. We don't have a number.
Yeah. I just want to return to an issue you raised earlier, and in fact, throughout the whole exercise of BERT, that we have to bring our debt to GDP ratio down to 60% by 2033. What is so magical about 60%? And why couldn't it be 70 or 75% by 2025?
Well, you know, you have to have benchmarks. What's so magical about it is that we don't live in the world by ourselves. And then if you look at countries, we see a level of development by this, emerging markets, etc. 60% is what is considered to be a sustainable level of debt going forward. So that is the anchor which the international community used to judge debt sustainability in dynamics, and therefore it is by default the anchor which we will use. But more, if you want history, 60% came out in the Maastricht criteria in England, where you have 3% debt, 3% growth, 3% fiscal, 3% growth, and 6% debt was the kind of targeted. But my own research by many persons, including myself, suggests that numbers above that are really not sustainable and actually takes more from growth than it adds to it. Remember with debt, the problem with debt is it has to be serviced. And the problem we had last time is that our debt was about 7.5% of GDP, consuming about a third of our revenues. It means that take away from other things you can do. So as debt starts to rise, it starts to choke off available resources for health, education, and other investment. That is why the capital program was about 1.4% of GDP, 140 million, and was insufficient to do the necessary infrastructure you see, and therefore you get an infrastructure gap. So freeing resources from debt, by keeping your debt at a sustainable level that you can manage, you got other fiscal space that you can do the critical things that you need to do. And that's why. But your answer, the only magic boy is that we don't live by ourselves. We live in a world where everybody, we are comparable. We always compare across countries as you try to invest. Okay.
Members of the media, if there are no other questions, I'd allow Dr. Greenidge to wrap up his presentation in terms of his final comments.
All right, so thank you very much. My final comments. I think, as I start by saying, this is we can view this like a relay, divided into 4 parts. And truly, we have made extraordinary strides in this relay already. We're doing faster than both could have done, even if he was running this. Huh? We finished, put together a program and was endorsed which was endorsed by the IMF after initial engagement in less than 3 months. That's extraordinary. And that goes to the strength of our program and the commitment. It is a very coherent and a program that hangs together, but every part of the program relies on the next part. If one part fails, the whole program will unravel. So it's why, as Barbadians, we need to be committed and work this right through. We can't stop now. And I guarantee, I can almost put my hat in the table. I don't wear a hat, but I will put it in if I did. That in a year and a half to 2 years, this economy you will not recognize. It will be growing at such a pace that you will not understand. You will say, wow, this is the same Barbados. We expect to grow back to historical rates of 2.5%, 3%. We want to hit that, even surpass it. But we've got to do the necessary work. The other achievement was on the debt restructuring, and the fact that even the local creditors, Sol, etc., like Empower, were willing to take their arrears over a 4-year period plan with no interest, again, is the endorsement of the fact that when they look at the program reforms, they are in with it. The only 2 parts now remain is to deal with the revenues and to deal with the modernization SOEs. Now, arguably that is it's getting hard as is, and this involves, because you can see the numbers, the human element, and one is too much. But in my view, we have no choice. As Barbadians, we need to get back where we were before. We used to be the #1 in the Caribbean and Western Hemisphere in terms of economic management and the model to follow. In 1993, we had the economic program, the IMF. I wrapped not too long. We had a program, the IMF, and it was followed by 14 years of economic growth, except for 2011 event that caused us to take. 14 years of economic growth, a success. And that is because we stuck to a program and a fiscal position. We need to get back there where we are seen as economic management. And I believe if we stick to this and we implement this program with the time that is necessary, the history books will be writing about the model Barbados economic model of adjustment and the way to follow. So I encourage us, we're all in this, we long haul, let's get it done. Thank you.
Members of the media or Facebook audience, thanks for joining us. That concludes this morning's press briefing.